Sefirot and the Soul 7. Each of the Sefirot possesses both an external as well as an internal dimension. The external dimension and characteristics of each Sephira, as described above, is identified with the functional role that the Sephira plays in the process of creation. The Sephira's internal dimension is identified with the hidden motivational force that inspires its activity. This inner dimension can only be appreciated in context of how it manifests itself in the soul, and thus gives us the context for looking at the Sefirot in relation to the dimension of the soul. Given the soul's divine origin, we can understand how an analysis of its essential characteristics can serve as the best vehicle for achieving insight into the meaning of the 10 Sefirot. While the Kabbalistic names of the Sefirot serve well to express the effect that each of these channels of divine energy has upon creation, in order to properly describe the function of the Sefirot in the context of the soul, a more experiential, or psychological terminology is employed. This terminology was first developed by Kabbalistic masters, but found its final form in the writings of the Chassidic masters. As we shall see, the terminology used to name each Sephira from the perspective of its inner experiential character perfectly parallels and reveals its essential nature. Let us begin by presenting the full chart of the Sefirot and their internal experiential manifestations. 102. What you need to know about Kabbalah: left axis, middle axis, right axis. Keter crown, faith, pleasure, will. Bina, understanding, joy. Chakma, wisdom, cognitive / selflessness, intellectual. Sefirot, dat. Knowledge, unification. Gevura, might, awe. Chest, loving kindness. Love, emotive. Sefirot, tiferet, beauty, mercy. Hod, acknowledgement, sincerity. Netzach, victory, pragmatic / confidence, behavioral. Sefirot, yesod. Foundation, truth. Malkut, kingdom, lowliness, crown, faith, pleasure, and will. Much like the intricate design of the crown of a king, so is the Sephira of crown described in the Zohar as comprising 3 heads. Each head symbolizes a different level of the superconscious. The highest of these is called the unknowable head, Radla, in the Hebrew acronym, and it is expressed in the soul as the experience of faith. The second head of the crown is termed the head of nothingness, Riyashadayin, and its inner experience in the soul is pleasure. The third head is called the long, extended head, Riyashadarik, and it manifests in the soul as the experience of will, or willpower. 2 Chapter 7, Sefirot and the Soul. 103. Let us take a moment to look at these 3 manifestations of the crown: faith, pleasure, and will. Faith, emuna, is the essential connection, or covenant, between Israel and God. 3 Chassidut teaches that the simple faith of the simple Jew links him or her to the simple, absolute, unity of God's very essence. Every Jewish soul inherits its faith from the patriarchs and matriarchs of the Jewish people. In particular, from Abraham, the first, monotheistic believer. For as an inherited trait, faith is always present in every Jewish soul, though not necessarily conscious. 5 While the source of Jewish faith comes from the patriarchs, it was the function of Moses to sustain and reinforce the consciousness of the faith of Israel, and hence Jewish identity. Just as a body needs physical sustenance to stay alive, so the faith inherent in every Jewish soul requires the figurative food of the Torah's wisdom in order to thrive. 6 Thus, in the Zohar, Moses is known as the faithful shepherd, Ra'aya Mahemna, which also means, the shepherd of faith. In the wanderings of the Jewish people in the desert, the heavenly manna, which provided spiritual as well as physical sustenance, was given in the merit of Moses. 7 Just as every Jewish soul is permeated with the faith of Abraham, each one is also permeated with the guiding wisdom of Moses. As explained in Chassidut, every Jew has a spark of the soul of Moses in him or her, which makes it possible for faith to be practically put to work in daily life. 8 In addition, in every generation there is a Tzaddik who in Kabbalah is referred to as the extension of Moses. 9 A particular leader who serves the same function as Moses, strengthening the true faith of monotheism. Pleasure, Ta'alug, as it is manifested in crown, is not a reaction to stimulation from a source external to the soul. Instead, it is an energetic source for the soul, namely it is the life force, the fluid or living waters, of all the soul's powers. The crown's pleasure particularly serves to motivate and direct superconscious will. Willpower, completely super-rational in itself, serves to control and direct, from above and without, all of the conscious powers of 104. What you need to know about Kabbalah: the soul, starting with the intellect, the soul's base of rationality. Once the rational mind is active, a lower level of willpower serves as the soul's source for the energy needed to willfully pursue those objectives rationally chosen by the mind. God's higher will finds its essential expression in the commandments given to Israel in the Torah. When we devotedly fulfill God's commandments purely because they are the expression of His essential will, we connect ourselves to His higher will. Devotion and acting devotedly are thus human expressions of God's higher will. By performing God's commandments for rational reasons, for instance, basing one's practice upon the secrets revealed to us in Kabbalah with regard to the spiritual effects of each commandment in particular, we connect ourselves to the lower level of God's will. Wisdom, selflessness, or self-nullification. Selflessness, vital, is the experiential state associated with wisdom. Selflessness does not just govern our interactions with other people, but first and foremost our relationship with God. With respect to God, selflessness does not mean doing something for Him, but rather maintaining a state of rectified being. Normally our state of mind is such that we seem to be autonomous beings, separate and independent from everything around us, including God. Selflessness in respect to God means nullifying our sense of being a separate entity, reducing our consciousness of self to naught, and feeling how we are actually one with the Almighty. Through selflessness we open our consciousness to a continuous flow of divine wisdom and insight, and thereby become aware of our true potential as part of the divine plan. 10 Chassidut identifies two levels of selflessness, or nullification of the self. The first, considered the absolute form of self-nullification, is called nullification of reality, whereby one loses all sense of his or her independent existence. The second is called nullification of ego, whereby while still feeling oneself. Chapter 7, Sefirot and the Soul. 105 Separate from God, one is actively engaged in the process of consciously nullifying his or her external layer of self-ego. This is accomplished by meditation on the continual recreation of all reality, including oneself, and the concentrated effort to experience one's own ego, which itself is continually being recreated something from nothing, as totally dependent on the divine nothing, the cause of its existence. The result of this spiritual effort is the realization that there is no independent reality other than God, a realization that serves to diminish the domain of the ego in one's psyche. Understanding, joy, simcha, is the spiritual state associated with the Sefirah of understanding. Joy comes from the spiritual satisfaction of having succeeded in comprehending an idea and relating it to one's emotions, eliciting emotional response. In Kabbalah, understanding is associated with motherhood, 11 of which the Bible says, "The mother of the children is joyful." 12 The joy of motherhood develops in progressive stages. First there is the joy of betrothal and marriage, which extends into the joy of anticipating pregnancy, a state of mind which actually facilitates conception. Then follows the joy of conceiving, which extends throughout the pregnancy into the joy of expecting birth. Finally, the mother of the children is joyful, because of the children she has borne, a joy that extends into her looking forward to raising them. Thus, though each joyous moment is the result of a particular stage of accomplishment, it also includes an anticipation for something more, a looking forward to the next stage. 13 This future anticipation associated with the experiential joy of the Sefirah of understanding helps to define the nature of understanding. In Kabbalah, Sefer Yitzchak describes the Sefirot as metaphysical depths of reality. There, the Sefirah of understanding is known as the depth of the future, an identification that is followed in the Zohar, which describes the 106. What you need to know about Kabbalah: inner experience of understanding as the joyous experience of the world to come. The three festivals of the Jewish year, Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, are the source of our experience of joy throughout the year. In Kabbalah, each of these festivals is likened to a different stage of feminine development, which itself corresponds to one of the three different stages of joy described above. The joy of Passover is likened to a daughter, which corresponds to the joy of betrothal and marriage and the consequent anticipation of conception. The joy of Shavuot, the celebration of the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, is likened to the experience of being a sister, a feeling of partnership with one's husband, as sister to brother, which reveals the joy of conception entailing the expectation of birth. Finally, The joy of Sukkot is described as the experience of being a mother, and hence corresponds to the joy of birth and the dedication to raising one's family. The joy of Sukkot concludes with the celebration of Simchat Torah, the joy of the Torah, implying that the consummate joy of motherhood involves building a home that celebrates God's greatest gift to us, His Torah. Knowledge, unification, Yitzchak, is the experiential state of the soul associated with the Sefirot of knowledge. As explained in Chassidut, knowledge means unification, particularly that of two bodies or souls. Of the union of man and wife, the Torah says, the male shall cling to his wife and they shall become one flesh. 14. This verse follows God's creating Adam and Eve, from Adam's own body. Subsequently, the Torah describes the physical union of Adam and Eve as an act of knowledge, and Adam knew his wife Eve. 15. The power of unification is rooted in the soul's experience of the Sefirot of knowledge. On this experience hinges one's ability to recognize his or her soulmate and establish with that person. And Chapter 7, Sefirot and the Soul. 107. Authentic rapport. Unification is thus the process of bringing back together the two lost halves of what was initially a single entity. 16. Unification occurs at all levels of reality. The source of the experience of unification between two people is in the corresponding spiritual unification that occurs in the spiritual realm. Kabbalah, especially as taught by the Arizal, interprets the content of the traditional Jewish prayers in terms of unifications that prayer facilitates between spiritual entities that affect the physical realm. These unifications are known as kavanot or mystical intentions. 17. 18. Loving kindness, love, ahava, is the experiential state associated with the Sefirot of loving kindness. God created the world with love and sustains the world with love, and, therefore, love is the essential power of growth. 19. Inherent throughout reality. The experience of love begins with a sense of attraction and being drawn to another, a sense that continues to grow and expand until it virtually encompasses one and one's beloved. Love can be pictured as an attractive vector force, flowing from one entity to another. 20. The numerical value of the word love in Hebrew is 13. Chassidic teachings note that there are 13 different types of love, which we will present here in chart form as they align and correspond with the Sefirot. Note also how, as mentioned above, the 10 Sefirot expand into 13, as follows. 108. What you need to know about Kabbalah. Adik, internal facet of Kron, the love of God for Israel. Erik, external facet of Kron, the love of Israel for God. Understanding, the love of a student for his teacher. Wisdom, the love of a teacher for his student. Knowledge, the love between students. Might, the love of a woman for her husband. Loving kindness, the love of a man for his wife. Beauty, the love between friends. Acknowledgement, the love of a child for his/her parent. Victory, the love of a parent for his/her child. Foundation, the love between siblings. Internal facet of kingdom, the love of a king for his subjects. External facet of kingdom, the love of subjects for their king. Of all these 13 types of love, the love between God and Israel is the most essential. The Torah teaches that love for God passes through 3 incremental stages, which are described in the verse, and you shall love God your God with all of your heart, and with all of your soul, and with all of your might. 21. Because love for God is the most essential of all the types of love, it defines the nature of all. Chapter 7, Sefirot and the Soul. 109. The others. Thus, just as love for God develops in 3 stages, so do each of the other types of love. The discussion of how each develops is of course beyond our scope here. 22. Might, fear, or awe, yira, is the inner dimension of the Sefirot of might, as it is experienced in the soul. In contrast to the heart's innate desire to give, which derives from love, fear expresses one's deeply felt apprehension that one's gift may fall into the hands of an unworthy recipient who may actually misuse it destructively. Fear evokes the might necessary to reject and even fight against negative and destructive forces. In a more general sense, fear is understood to represent one's sensitivity to the presence of another. Sensitivity gives rise to consideration of the other's feelings and respect for him or her. With respect comes a sense of distance, not to interfere with the other. So, while love motivates attraction and closeness, fear stands in awe from afar. In relation to God, there are many levels of fear, which in general are categorized under two separate headings, awe and fear. Awe is usually the result of intellectual understanding, such as when one realizes that one is standing in the presence of God's infinite being. Fear usually results from an emotional realization, such as the experience that one may have of the fear of punishment that follows God's justice. Fear of punishment is not completely pure in its motivation. It does not relate to God directly as the object of one's perception or comprehension, but rather derives from an indirect experience of the divine. Therefore, it involves a mixture of good and evil, good, by deterring the person from performing negative acts, and evil, because it shadows one's consciousness with thoughts of bad consequences. The two powers of love and fear complement one another and act as a pair, as the two hands of the body in their common effort to construct. In the Zohar, love and awe are likened to the two wings of a bird in its flight upward. This metaphor is meant to 110. What you need to know about Kabbalah stress that without love and awe, the two archetypal emotional experiences, the worship of God, and specifically the performance of His commandments, remains grounded, unable to lift up spiritually. Beauty, mercy, Rachamim, is the experiential state associated with the Sefirot of beauty. Compassion synthesizes the apparently opposite forces of love and fear, the desire to give and the demand to withhold. Love considers everything and everyone as a potential recipient of its benevolence. Fear first judges each potential recipient, determining whether he or she or it is worthy of receiving the benevolence. Mercy allows true empathy for others, by considering them in the context of their present life situations. It penetrates beneath and beyond superficial objectivity. In this vein, the sages describe God judging creation on Rosh Hashanah, the new year, as seemingly standing up from the throne of severe judgment and sitting down, as it were, on the throne of mercy. 23 Although the gifts of pure love and loving kindness may be quantitatively greater than those of mercy, giving out of an experience of mercy is qualitatively richer. By mercy, we give our very selves to others, for our empathy with them is so great that we feel that they are an actual extension of ourselves. Victory, confidence, Bitachon, is the experiential state associated with the Sefirot of victory. Hasidic teachings identify two types of confidence, active and passive. Active confidence is the confidence we possess in our own ability to succeed in life. Passive confidence is the trust that we have in divine providence that things will turn out well. The active confidence of victory represents the power of the soul to take initiative. God desires of us independent initiative, Chapter 7, Sefirot and the Soul. 111 The initiative to rectify all that lies within our sphere of influence. But, in taking initiative, we must continually recognize that it is God who desires and inspires our taking initiative, and that it is He who gives us the power to succeed and achieve. 24 Without the continual influx of His life force and energy we would remain powerless. As a Jew, one's confidence to take initiative is accompanied with a sense of one's being a part of the eternal people, the people of God, the eternity of Israel. 25 The people who in the end will be victorious over all those that oppose them and all obstacles that stand in their way, even over the angel of death. Confidence entails the ability to envision how our dreams will come true, in its essence, a minor form of prophecy. As explained in Kabbalah, the source of prophecy is in the Sefirot of victory, eternity and acknowledgement. 26 Eternity manifests the soul's power to endow our children with a holy feeling of self-confidence, as the son is his father's thigh. 27 The thigh being party of the bodily manifestation of eternity, or victory, as will be explained. Acknowledgement, sincerity, Timimut, is the experiential state associated with the Sefirot of acknowledgement. The Hebru or Timimut is often translated as naivete, just as a child is naturally naive. It is the ability to retain a child's seemingly naive and direct outlook on life that allows a person to live his life in a state of sincerity. Without sincerity, doubt and cynicism dampen and ridicule one's trust and confidence in the Almighty and in one's ability to truly be successful in growing closer to Him. So, just as acknowledgement complements victory and together they are considered two sides of the same coin, so the experiential state of sincerity complements that of confidence. There are three general levels of sincerity: sincerity of will, sincerity of heart, and sincerity of action. In Hebrew, sincerity, timimut, implies completeness. Thus, sincerity of will means that one is fully committed to fulfill God's will. This type of sincere 112? What you need to know about Kabbalah commitment does not necessarily penetrate the soul's emotional realm or make its mark on all of one's actions. Sincerity of heart is the complete devotion of all one's experience to serving God. What this means is that regardless of the situation that one finds oneself in and the emotional experience that the situation evokes, one's heart is singularly directed and devoted to serving the Almighty. At the level of action, sincerity represents our sense of down-to-earth commitment and dedication to meticulously fulfill each and every detail of God's commandments. Chassidut teaches that of all the emotions of the heart, sincerity, in all its aspects, is an innate gift of God, the hardest attribute to be acquired through conscious effort. It is indeed the most essential attribute of the Jewish people. 28 Throughout the Bible, sincerity appears as an idiom together with the verb to walk. 29 With sincerity, God's chosen people can walk in His ways and, in essence, walk with Him. Foundation, truth, emet, is the experiential state of the soul manifested by the Sefirot of foundation. According to the sages, the seal of the Almighty is truth. 30 Thus, truth refers to a concluding, sealing principle, as we will explain. It is as if truth acts as a sealant. The final Hebrew letters of the three words that conclude the account of creation. God created to do. 31, spell truth. God created reality to do, which means that it is incumbent upon us, God's intelligent creatures, to complete the doing, that is, seek the fulfillment of creation by rectifying it. And, the seal of creation, the instrument of fulfillment, is truth. Additionally, the Hebrew word for truth is described by the sages as comprising the first, middle, and last letters of the Hebrew alphabet, thus linking it with God's plan for creation, beginning with His will, symbolized by the first letter. Aleph, Chapter 7, Sefirot and the Soul. 113 followed by the ongoing act of creation, symbolized by the letter Mem, and culminating with His seal, or divine signature, being reflected and recognized in everything, symbolized by the letter Tav, whose name literally means a stamp or a seal. As an emotional state of the soul, truth is understood to be the experience of the soul's impulsive drive that comes at the climax of a creative pursuit. This drive seeks to make the purpose of the pursuit come true. Where victory was the ability to stand up and take initiative, envisioning one's future success, truth provides the power and drive to make one's efforts succeed in the here and now. Truth thus entails the experience of self-fulfillment in all of life's endeavors. Indeed, truth is the power to realize our deepest potential, which is in fact the power of the soul to bring about the ultimate realization of God's infinite potential. Kingdom, lowliness, shaflat, is the experiential state associated with the Sephirah of kingdom. In contrast to selflessness, the experiential state of wisdom, lowliness does not imply the negation of self, but rather the experience of oneself as existentially distant from God. It is said that, from afar, God appears to me. 32 God's very essence is revealed to the person who feels distant from Him, more so than to the person who feels close to Him. Close and far here are not meant objectively, for just as every positive number, no matter how large, is equally smaller than infinity, so every individual, regardless of how pious and righteous, is infinitely far from the Almighty's infinite being. Lowliness also serves as the ultimate motivation to return to God, for when God appears from afar one is aroused to approach and embrace Him. And indeed, God reveals His essence to the one who is ever returning to Him. The Baal Shem Tov teaches that the beginning of all divine service, the gateway of the Sephirah of kingdom, as explained above, is to experience an existential sense of identification with even the most lowly of creatures on earth, as though saying, they all fulfill 114. What you need to know about Kabbalah, God's purpose and design faithfully. Were only I able to do the same. Being that lowliness is the experience of kingdom, it also serves as the defining characteristic of every true leader, regardless of the size of the group being lead. As related regarding King David, the true king is able to realize his sovereignty constructively in direct proportion to the depth of his existential state of lowliness. Indeed, as we saw earlier, 33 the Hebrew words for low tide, shefel, and high tide, joit, symbolic of a leader's lowliness and sovereignty, are numerically equal. The Sefirot and the human body, just as the 10 Sefirot can be seen manifest in the soul, so can they be seen manifest in the human body. Elsewhere we have explored models revealing the manifestation of the Sefirot in the human body, including some models dealing with particular organs. 34 Here we will present the most straightforward model, which has been the staple of the study of Kabbalah for generations. Crown is manifest in the body as the skull. Just as a crown encircles the head, so the skull encircles the brain. The skull further suggests the idea of placing a physical border on our field of conscious experience. Like consciousness, which is always surrounded by a border of unconscious experience that bounds it, the brain is surrounded by a physical barrier limiting its ability to expand. In Kabbalah, wisdom, the father principle, is considered to be the essential power of the mind, or the mind within the mind, while understanding, the mother principle, is regarded as the heart within the mind. Mind is identified with water, while heart is identified with fire. Mind is cool, calm, and collected, while heart is hot, enamored, and passionate. Wisdom, the mind within the mind, is the intellect's cooler side, while understanding, the heart within the mind, is the intellect's warmer side. This distinction also plays itself out in the body, where wisdom is identified with the right lobe of the brain and understanding with the left lobe. The right lobe is more intuitive and insightful, water, while the left chapter 7, Sefirot and the soul, 115 lobe is more analytic and critical, fire. The right lobe of the brain oversees the lungs, the water cooler of the body, while the left lobe of the brain oversees the heart, the fiery blood pump of the body. In the Zohar we find that without the cooling effect of the lungs on the heart would burn itself up. 35 Knowledge, which also translates as consciousness, and acts as a bridge between the mind and the heart, is identified with the rear lobe of the brain. At the point where the brain meets the spine, the position of the occipital lobe. With regard to the 3 emotional properties of the soul, we find that the right arm embodies loving kindness and the left arm embodies might. This is alluded to in the verse from the Song of Songs, 36 His left arm is under my head, and his right arm embraces me. As related above regarding these 2 Sefirot, in certain contexts the sages prescribe that the left arm should repel, while the right arm should draw near. In this context the left arm grants others a sense of independence, the metaphorical meaning of under my head, before the right arm seeks to draw them near, embraces me. The balancing power in the Sephira of beauty, identified with the torso, holds together all the parts of the body. Victory and acknowledgement, the behavioral Sefirot, correspond to the right and left legs, respectively. The legs represent the first and most continual contact with outer reality, the earth. Moreover, the legs facilitate the movement of the body as a whole, bringing a person where he or she wants to go. Victory portrays the quality of putting one's best foot forward in an assertive posture, and thus corresponds to the right leg, which is the more dominant of the legs. Acknowledgement, which corresponds to the left leg, keeps a person's movement on course by monitoring and validating his or her assertive thrust. Foundation corresponds to the male and female reproductive organs, which lie between the 2 legs. Referred to as the conclusion of the body, 37 Foundation is the body's hidden source and undercurrent of all physical manifestation, similar to the underground foundation of a building, and its ability to actualize. 116 What you need to know about Kabbalah and fulfill itself through procreation. Just as the crown is described as the unmovable mover, the unchanging divine source of all change, so Foundation is the unrevealed revealer, the source of the soul's ability to express itself, which itself is never openly expressed. The last Sephira, kingdom, manifests in the mouth. With speech we create our domain of influence. The word of the king is his authority. 38 Meaning that the extent of any leader's rule is marked by how far his word travels. 39 The ability of the mouth to speak, to produce self-expression, is the power to affect one's environment, one's world. The ruling quality of speech is clearly illustrated by the fact that in order to create the world, the Almighty spoke, as described in the first chapter of Genesis. Summarizing the correspondence between the Sefirot and the human body, we have Keter crown skull. Bina understanding brain, left lobe. Chakma wisdom cognitive/brain, right lobe intellectual Sefirot dat. Knowledge brain, rear lobe. Gevura might left arm. Chest loving kindness right arm emotive Sefirot Tiferet. Beauty torso. Hod acknowledgement left leg. Netzach victory pragmatic/right leg behavioral Sefirot Yesod. Foundation procreative organ. Malkut kingdom mouth chapter 7, Sefirot and the soul. 117 The Sefirot and the Partzufim. The Partzufim, which literally mean personae, singular, Partzuf, form a highly complex Kabbalistic model in which the Sefirot metamorphose into human-like figures or personalities. Each Partzuf possesses a full set of intellectual, emotive, and behavioral powers and is characterized by its ability to combine disparate elements into a unified whole, which is why each possesses a full set of 10 Sefirot of its own that continue to develop into 613 individual components. Just as in the process of a seminal unit developing into a full human, the human stature, containing 248 limbs and 365 sinews. 248? 365 equals 613. Unlike the Sefirot whose interconnections and interactions are relatively easy to understand, lower levels evolving naturally from higher levels, higher-level Partzufim relate to lower-level Partzufim by a much more mysterious relationship called enclothement or incarnation, just as a soul enters a body. The Partzufim and their interactions are too complex to be treated with rigor in an introductory text on Kabbalah. It is only the most difficult and mysterious sections of the Zohar that contain an exposition on their nature. One might ask, if indeed the Partzufim present such an elaborate model, how are they useful? The answer is that Partzufim form part of a more advanced way of analyzing reality. Without them, most of the more complex aspects of our lives would remain incomprehensible. Much as advanced statistical mechanics are necessary for designing and understanding complex physical systems, but are not readily understood by all, so the model of the Partzufim is necessary for understanding the deeper secrets of the spiritual realm, even though they too are not readily understood. However, there are a few points that even the beginning student of Kabbalah should be aware of. First, there are 6 primary Partzufim, each composed of a binary complex of secondary Partzufim, one male and one female, as follows. 118. What you need to know about Kabbalah Sefirot primary Partzuf secondary Partzufim. Adik Yomin, the male facet of the Ancient of Days. Adik Yomin the Ancient of Days. Nukve Dadik Yomin the female facet of the Ancient of Days. Eric Anpin, the male facet of the long face Keter crown. Eric Anpin the long face. Nukve Derek Anpin the female facet of the long face. Abba Elias supernal father Chakma wisdom. Abba father. Ima Elias supernal mother. Yiriel Sawa Bina Israel the elder understanding. Ima mother. Tevuna comprehension. Yiriel Israel minute emotional and habitual Sefirot. Zer Anpin the small face Leah. Yaakov Jacob Melka kingdom. Nukve Dezir Anpin the female of Zer Anpin. Rachel as can be seen from the chart, the Partzufim correspond to the Sefirot, retaining the Kabbalistic dictum that regardless of the complexity of a model, it can always be expressed in terms of a more generalized, less particularized model. In this case, the more complex model of the Partzufim, more complex, because each Partzuf is itself made up of the full gamut of the Sefirot, which continue to develop into a complete human-like figure containing 613 individual components, can be expressed in terms of the Sefirot. Chapter 7, Sefirot and the Soul. 119 For example, the Sephira of Kingdom corresponds to the primary Partzuf, Nukve Dezir Anpin, the female facet of the small face, and into the pair of secondary Partzufim, one male and one female, both within the primary female Partzuf, called Jacob, and Rachel, each of which possesses all the 10 Sefirot arranged in 3 axes as we saw above, 248 limbs and 365 sinews. Notes. 1. For an in-depth discussion of this topic, see Consciousness and Choice, pages 16 to 19. 2. See also The Art of Education, pages 39 ff. 3. Above we explained that foundation is the Sephirah associated with covenants. In the Zohar, 3:230a, foundation, especially, its inner experiential quality of truth and faith form a masculine-feminine pair of complementary powers, as in the liturgical phrase truth and faith, first benediction following the evening Shema. See also Baratrit 12a. The Zohar also explains that there is no faith without a covenant. The numerical illustration of this is that 6 times the value of the word faith, 102, is equal to the value of covenant, 612. The sum of the letters of the Hebrew word for faith written according to the Kabbalistic guidelines known as posterior and anterior, see The Art of Education, pages 255, is also 612. 4. In Hebrew, the Mitler Rebus Torat Haim, Vawira 106d, and elsewhere. 5. For Abraham's role in establishing the faith of the Jewish soul, see The Art of Education, pages 65 ff. 6. This is especially true for deriving innovative Torah which originates in the soul of Moses. 7. Ta'anit 9a. Indeed, the first appearance of the word manna, man, in Hebrew, in the Torah is in the phrase man who. Literally, what is it, or, according to some commentaries, it is food, which permutes into the word emunah, faith. 8. Tanya, ch. 42. 9. Tikkun Zohar 69, 112a, 114a. 120? What you need to know about Kabbalah 10. In the language of Chassidut, selflessness is the ability to experience the nothingness, Ayin, of our own being within the all-encompassing radiance of God's infinite being, or Ein Sof. 11. The association of understanding with the maternal is illustrated in the verse, for, if you call upon understanding, Proverbs 2:3. The word if, in Hebrew, can also be read as mother. 12. Psalms 113:9. 13. Thus we find that many women sometime after giving birth want another child, regardless of how difficult the pregnancy and labor were. The woman innately understands that the joy brought by every newborn child is an expression of the sweetening of the harsh judgments in their source, see pages 149, and feels like an individual who has 100, wants 200. The mixed message of satisfaction with dissatisfaction many times confuses her spouse. The dissatisfaction is caused by her feeling that she has not yet reached her final rectified state. In Kabbalah, this dissatisfaction is viewed as the reason that understanding is expansive, forever spreading. See the correspondence of understanding with the Hay of Havaya and expansion on pages 129 ff. Immediately setting her gaze on the future also saves the mother principle from experiencing her present satisfaction as her own success, disconnecting her from the divine. A biblical example illustrating this point is that the dough taken by the children of Israel out of Egypt did not get a chance to rise, that is to become acidic by fermentation, Exodus 12:39. See also the Passover Haggadah. Though they experienced tremendous satisfaction in having surmounted Egypt, it did not show and was not to their detriment. In Hebrew, not get a chance to rise can be read not satisfied to rise. 14. Genesis 2:24. 15. Ebed 4:1. 16. See in length in consciousness and choice. The Sephirah of knowledge is also the source of consciousness in our experience as human beings. 17. The arisal explain the various intentions in terms of the intellect. Chassidut translates the intellectual language of the arisal into an experiential language, thus informing the heart. Chapter 7, Sefirot and the soul. 121, which is experiential and emotional, through the mind, which is intellectual. This in itself, the mind informing the heart, is the consummate form of unification within the individual. In fact, the area of the body associated with the Sephirah of knowledge, the progenitor of unification, is the top back of the neck, which lies as a link between the head, mind, and the torso, heart. 18. The arisal also taught us to take upon ourselves the commandment of love your fellow as yourself, Leviticus 19:18, before praying, implying that the purpose of the unifications created above through prayer is to create unity between our souls below. The final purpose of prayer is thus said before even beginning to pray, following the divine rule that the goal should be in mind from the outset, Lecha Dodi, based on a similar statement in Sefirot 1:7, the end is unwedged in the beginning. 19. In pre-arisal Kabbalistic terminology, loving-kindness was usually called greatness, Gedula, which in Hebrew also refers to the power of growth. 20. Pre-Newtonian mechanics, and even Newton, himself, described the attraction between bodies as a state of love. Modern physics calls this attractive force gravitation, which is still defined as an action at a distance as it requires no medium to propagate. It is in a similar sense that love has the power to span distance, and bring together even those who are far apart. 21. Deuteronomy 6:5. 22. In the original Hebrew this verse contains 39, or 3 times 13 letters. Recall that the numerical value of love in Hebrew is 13, thus the number of letters alludes to the 3 stages of love that the verse describes, a beautiful example of self-reference. 39 is also the value of God is one. The 2 last words of the verse preceding this one, "Hear, O Israel, God is our God, God is one," implying that true love for God is generated from the cognizance of God's absolute unity. 23. Alter Rebbe's Likutei Torah, Nazavim 50b. See Avodah Zarah 3b. 24. Deuteronomy 8:18. 25. 1 Samuel 15:29. 122. What you need to know about Kabbalah 26. Which is also the reason that the holy name Tzvakot was only revealed by the prophets, see pages 152 ff. 27. Yonat Elem, ch. 2. Eitzheim 23:1, and elsewhere. 28. The word Had, the Hebrew name for the Sephira of acknowledgement, whose inner experience is sincerity, is the etymological source for the word Yehudi, a Jew. 29. Proverbs 10:9, and elsewhere. 30. Shabbat 55a. 31. Genesis 2:3. 32. Jeremiah 31:2. 33. See pages 73. 34. See Body, Mind, and Soul, chs. 2 and 3. 35. Zohar 3, 233b 234a. 36. Song of Songs 2:6. 37. Introduction to Tikkun Zohar. 38. Ecclesiastes 8:4. 39. The first sign of sovereignty is that the king is so named. This is his word acting indirectly to establish his kingdom. Then the king is able to rule by speaking. God, why do Israel pray